who visits to her physician because she has noticed increased yellowish hue to her skin for past week. On physical examination, there is no abdominal pain or tenderness, and the liver span is normal. The lab findings include HB of 10.7, hematocrit of 33.2, MCV of 94 micrometer, uh, platelet count of 3.17 lakh, WBC count of 7,200, and total protein is 5.5 gram per deciliter, albumin 3.5 gram per deciliter. Total bilirubin is slightly increased. It's 8.9 milligram per deciliter with a direct bilirubin of 0.6 milligram per deciliter. The AST ALT levels are normal and alkaline phosphatase is 35 units, international units per liter. So, any of you want to guess what would be the most likely diagnosis in this patient? Can anyone point out what is the case? What can anyone think of likely diagnosis among the five options that we have given here? Okay, let's see the case. So we see that she is a middle-aged woman. Okay, and we see that she has yellowish discoloration of skin. So what is jaundice? How do you define jaundice? Can anyone type the answers? Okay, what is jaundice? Yellowish discoloration of sclera. Very good, Vivek. Yes. In jaundice, we see yellowish discoloration. What else? There is also skin discoloration. Okay, yellow discoloration of both skin and sclera. And why do you see this yellowish discoloration of skin? What is the cause of this yellowish discoloration? Yes, Satvik, Vivek, very good. There is yellowish discoloration of skin. Why is it yellow? Why is it yellow? Due to which pigment? Bilirubin deposition. Very good, Vivek. So, what are the? Why is it so that it deposits in skin and the sclera? Can anyone answer? Okay, let's see. So, jaundice is yellowish discoloration of skin and sclera due to abnormally elevated levels of bilirubin in blood, and the levels should be more than 2.5 milligram per deciliter. Then only it appears in the skin. So, it is evident in both eyes and even skin. The yellowish discoloration is because of the bilirubin pigment which attaches itself to the elastin fibers which are present in skin and sclera. And the concentration of elastin fibers is more in sclera. So even before the skin, you can see it in the sclera. Okay. Okay. Let's go ahead. What other history would you like to ask in this patient? Would you like to ask some other history in this patient? अंजलि इस रूम को यूज किया Would you like to ask any other history in this patient? Yes, we'll ask for history of alcohol intake. What else? We'll ask for drug history. Very good. Any other history? Okay. So we'll ask for drug history, alcohol history. Very good. We'll ask for history of pruritus. Very good. So let's. Why would you ask history of pruritus? Yes, very good, Vivek. Why would you ask history of pruritus? We'll ask for history of dark colored urine. Okay. So let's have a look. We'll ask for history of pruritus, alcohol intake, dark colored urine, the history of clay colored stools, and stool of which float in the pan. We'll ask all these history from the patient. We have to ask these histories to differentiate the type of jaundice. Okay, there are two types of jaundice as we have discussed. You must have been taught in biochemistry also. There are two types of jaundice. There is a conjugated when there is rise in the conjugated bilirubin, and the other is when there is rise in the unconjugated bilirubin. So let's take a look at the bilirubin metabolism. Uh, can anyone tell me what are the different causes of bilirubinemia? Okay, let's take a look at the bilirubin metabolism since nobody is answering. So here we see the old RBCs when they age, the mononuclear phagocytic system take up these RBCs, and the hemoglobin in the RBCs is broken down into heme and globin. Okay, this all we've covered in biochemistry earlier. Okay, so this hemoglobin is taken up, and it is broken down into heme and globin. Globin is further broken down into amino acids, and heme is converted into protoporphyrin and iron. This protoporphyrin is converted into biliverdin and then into bilirubin. And in circulation, this unconjugated bilirubin combines with albumin and is carried to the liver where it is conjugated further. Okay, so can you tell me what in this cycle up till here, if what all causes can lead to the rise in bilirubin? What are the different causes which might lead to a rise in bilirubin up till here, which will eventually lead to rise in unconjugated bilirubin? So can you tell us can you tell us different causes which will cause the increase in bilirubin because of this part? Anyone? Hemolytic anemia, very good. Hemolytic anemia, very good. Vivek. Vivek is answered. Hemolytic anemia, liver failure. Liver failure, yes. If liver failure will eventually lead to decrease in the conjugation. Yes. What else? Decrease amino acid production. Uh, okay. What else? Okay. Let's see. So any level in this whole series, if there is increase in the destruction of RBCs, or there is ineffective erythropoiesis, as you see in macrocytic anemia, okay, and B12 and folic acid deficiency. In all these cases, we see that is ineffective erythropoiesis. So, in all these cases, there will be an increase in unconjugated bilirubin, or there is a damage to the liver which causes which affects the part of conjugation, and the conjugation of this bilirubin is not occurring in the liver. It will cause increase in the unconjugated bilirubin in blood. Okay. So in liver, the albumin and bilirubin complex will come, and it will be conjugated. And what do you understand when we say the bilirubin is conjugated? So bilirubin is lipid soluble, right? And it will be by the process of conjugation, we add glucuronides to this bilirubin and we make it water soluble. Okay, and this water soluble conjugated bilirubin is then secreted into the bile. Okay, it is secreted into the bile. Some of it is stored in the gallbladder, and it is secreted in the intestine. Now, these bilirubin is metabolized by the gut flora in the intestine, and it is converted into urobilinogens, which most of which are excreted into the stools and give the yellow color to the stools. And 20% of these are reabsorbed and are excreted in the urine as uropigments. Okay. Now, so we had discussed that the patient will have. We will ask for the history of pruritus. Can anyone explain why the patient has pruritus? Why a patient with jaundice will have pruritus? Bile salts, yes, bile salts will accumulate and that they will call pruritus. Okay, very good. So these bile salts in obstructive jaundice, what will happen? The bile salts are released into the blood, which cause pruritus. Okay, and why will we ask the history of pale colored stools? Anyone? Why will we ask the history of pale colored stools? What? Okay, so we'll ask the history of pale colored stools because obstructive jaundice will lead to pale colored stools, and because there will be no bile which will be secreted, and eventually these pigments, urobilinogens, will not be released into the intestine, and the stools will be pale colored. Also, in obstructive jaundice, we'll ask for history of stools which float in pan. Why will we ask that? Because the bile. So, can anyone answer that? Why will we ask the feces which will float in pan or which will be foul smelling? Yeah, steatorrhea. Steatorrhea. Very good, Sumit. Steatorrhea occurs in such patients in obstructive jaundice. The patients will have steatorrhea because there is decrease in the in hepatic or obstructive jaundice. There will be decrease in bile secretion, due to which the fat will not be absorbed and it will be excreted in the stools, and that will give foul smell to it, and it will float because fats usually are water insoluble, so it will float. Okay, let's go ahead. Now, what are the different causes of jaundice? So, we can divide the causes of jaundice into pre-hepatic causes, hepatic causes, and post-hepatic causes. And it can be classified as uh, obstructive jaundice and non-obstructive jaundice. Pre-hepatic causes will include all the causes which will lead to increased bilirubin production, like for example, extravascular RBC hemolysis. Okay, then hepatic causes or ineffective erythropoiesis. The hepatic causes will include the hepatocyte dysfunction, which predominantly includes the hepatitis. Then we come to post-hepatic causes, which include the causes which leads to obstruction of the bile, like some stones in impacted gallstones. And okay, can someone answer which type of other what can someone answer what are the two types of gallstones that we know of? Yeah, what are the different types of stones that you know of? Cholesterol stones, yes, and pigment stones. Okay, so there are two types of stones: cholesterol stones and pigment stones. Then, okay, so we have two types of stones: cholesterol stones and pigment stones. And most cholesterol stones are larger and usually solitary, but pigment stones are smaller and multiple. And these pigment stones will go and pass and obstruct the neck of the gallbladder. Okay, so this is quickly see the bilirubin metabolism. The senescent RBCs will go if at this step there is increased destruction of RBCs, which can be due to different hemolytic anemias or ineffective erythropoiesis, then there is increase in the unconjugated bilirubin. And why does in unconjugated hemolytic anemias there is increase in unconjugated bilirubin, because there is a limited capacity for hepatocytes to conjugate the bilirubin. Okay, that is why there when the destruction is occurring at a very high rate, the hepatocytes are not able to cover the the step of conjugation at same rate, due to which there is increase in the indirect bilirubin. Okay. Now, we divide the causes of jaundice into predominantly unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia and predominantly conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. So, as we discussed, there is excess production, or there is reduced hepatic uptake, or there is impaired bilirubin. conjugation. So in excess production, it will include the hemolytic anemia, ineffective erythropoiesis, and if some patient presents with internal hemorrhage, then also the patient might have increased bilirubin. Okay, sometimes the patient of patients having large ecchymosis might also present with jaundice. Okay, then patients with reduced hepatic uptake due to any drug interference may present with bilirubin, hyperbilirubinemia. Also, there are some genetic diseases like Gilbert syndrome and Crigler-Najjar syndrome. These patients have defect in the metabolism at this level. So, in Gilbert and Crigler-Najjar syndrome, there is a defect in conjugation. But in Dubin-Johnson syndrome, there is a defect in secretion. So, it is after the conjugation, the defect is after the conjugation has occurred. So, in Dubin-Johnson syndrome, which is a genetic defect, there will be increase in the conjugated bilirubin. Okay, this all we have been read in biochemistry. Uh, Now, predominantly conjugate hyperbilirubinemia, the causes will be majorly hepatocellular. There is decreased hepatocellular excretion, or there is impaired flow of bile. Okay, so in decreased hepatocellular excretion, the genetic causes will include the Dubin syndrome. Other causes will be hepatocellular damage or toxicity due to drugs or infections like viral hepatitis, and then in extrahepatic blood flow obstruction can be due to either uh, there is a tumor at the neck of the pancreas which is causing the obstruction of the bile duct, or there are parasites like liver fluke, or most commonly it is gallstone disease. Okay. Now, in this patient, we found on physical examination there was no abdominal pain or tenderness, uh, and the liver span was normal. The laboratory findings include the laboratory findings include hemoglobin of 10, hematocrit of 33. So, can anyone tell us any further investigation that you would like to do in such patient? Any further investigation you would like to do in patient? Hello, is it clear now? Hello, is my voice clear now? Hello, am I audible? Okay, let's go ahead. So, what other investigations would you like to do? Anyone? Anyone want to answer? Okay, let's go ahead. So we'll ask for a peripheral smear examination. As you can see here, the patient has a low hemoglobin value and hematocrit is also decreased, and there's increase in bilirubin. So we'll think on the line that the patient might have hemolysis. Okay, because there is anemia, there is low hematocrit. So we'll think that the patient might be having hemolysis also. Okay, what is the cause? We'll think of the cause. Why is the patient having anemia? Also, we can see the liver function tests are normal. So if the liver function tests were normal, then we could have thought of there is some hepatocellular damage also occurring. But since the liver is normal, so we'll ask for a peripheral smear examination to look for the cause of anemia. We'll ask for urine examination. Okay, we'll ask for urine examination, and what all we see, we'll do urobilinogen level, urine bilirubin level, and pyrosols if present or not. So, what are the tests that we do for all of these? Anyone? What test you do for urobilinogens? Yes, very good. Okay, so we'll do peripheral smear examination. Yes, Prakhar has answered. We'll do peripheral smear examination and urine investigations. Yes. What else? Yes, we do. Yes, we do hair sulfur test for pyrosols. Okay, we do hair sulfur test for pyrosols, and for bilirubin we do Fauci's test. Okay, then we'll do viral serology. Although the liver function tests were normal, but we should rule out the hepatitis causes of hepatitis also. Then we can do X-ray abdomen for gallstone disease. Okay, and in this patient, what we found were that there was on ultrasound on of abdomen, we could find pigment stones, and on peripheral smear, we found the smear. So, what are the findings on the smear? You've already you've already done hemolytic anemia, right? Hemat has been finished. So, what all will you find in a patient with hemolytic anemia on peripheral smear? So, on peripheral smear, yes, anyone? What are these? Yes, Adiba, very good. Reticulocytosis. What else? Yes, Ansh, very good. Helmet cells, very good. So, so we'll see there are helmet cells. There are these are sphenocytes. Okay, then we'll see these are the NRBCs. Okay, nucleated RBCs, which are seen on peripheral smear. We might also find, okay, what are schistocytes are have pointed edges. Okay, schistocytes will have pointed edges. So we on peripheral smear we'll find schistocytes, nucleated RBCs, and we'll find schistocytes, nucleated RBCs, okay, in hemolytic anemia. So this was a case of hemolytic anemia. Let's go to next case. A 3-year-old woman with icterus and intense pruritus for 1 month comes to the physician. She has a past, in the past 3 years, she has had several bouts of colicky mid-abdominal pain, and on physical examination, she has generalized jaundice with scleral icterus. There is tenderness in the right upper quadrant, and the liver span is normal. The liver biopsy is done, and on microscopic examination of specimen, bile duct proliferation and intracanalicular bile stasis is seen, but no inflammation of hepatocyte or hepatocyte necrosis was seen. Which of the following serum lab findings is most likely to be present in the patient? So, can anyone answer this question? Elevated ALP. Okay, okay. So why? Let's have a look at the case. So the 33-year-old woman has icterus. So icterus is yellowish discoloration of sclera and with intense pruritus. So pruritus give us a hint that the patient might be having obstructive jaundice because bile is also released in the blood, because of which she is having pruritus for 1 month. Then we here we've been told that she's have had several bouts of colicky mid-abdominal pain. That means that she's having an episodic disease. Okay, this because she's having a episodic disease. Okay, then on examination, we find there is jaundice and scleral icterus, and there is tenderness in the right upper quadrant. So the tenderness, what does this tenderness in right upper quadrant depict? What all can we think when this is mentioned? Anyone? Liver gallbladder involvement? Yes, Vanshika. Yes. So the tenderness will depict that there is on in right upper quadrant there is, but since we have also mentioned that the liver span is normal, so there is no hepatomegaly as such, but the liver is tender. Either there is liver tenderness or there is increase in the there is gallbladder tenderness, and usually tenderness is present when there is inflammation, right? Okay, pigment. Uh, there is liver, there might be liver damage, yes. Okay, so then they told us that they have done a liver biopsy, and on microscopic examination we see bile duct proliferation and intracanalicular bile stasis. Since they've given a history that on biopsy we see bile stasis, so we might think of that there is some obstructive cause, right? Since all of these will point us towards some obstructive cause. There is pruritus, there is colicky pain. Colicky pain is usually seen in uh, gallstone disease, right? And there is on biopsy also you see bile duct proliferation and intracanalular bile stasis. So in this case, we'll get what other investigation we'll get done. We'll get done a liver function test. In liver function test, and what other history would you like to ask in this patient? Any other history that you would like to ask in this patient? Any other history? GERD, yes. We should ask for history of GERD. What else? Okay, we'll ask for history of vomiting, stone and pancreas, head enlargement. Yeah, so we can ask for an investigation which will help us to visualize the gallbladder and the bile ducts and even the pancreas. So we can do this either just if we want to examine for stone, we can ask an X-ray, and if we want to examine the pancreas, we can ask for an ultrasound abdomen. What else? Okay. What other investigation? Yes, as we've discussed, we'll ask for the ultrasound, the X-ray, the liver function test. In this patient, we'll ask for liver function test. So, what all entities does a liver function test include? Yes. So it includes six parameters. Uh, Serum bilirubin levels, which will include the total bilirubin level and direct bilirubin level, and from which we can calculate the indirect bilirubin level. It will include the serum protein levels, total protein, and serum albumin. It will include alanine transaminase and aspartate transaminase, alkaline phosphatase, and gamma glutamyl transferase. So, can someone tell me the what all types of liver injury, which all parameter will be raised? So, which kind of injury in this patient will uh, in this patient, since we know the history, we know there is some obstructive etiology from history and from examination. We've reached the diagnosis that there is some probably obstructive pathology, right? So, what would we expect to be raised in this patient? Yes, in this patient, what will we think is raised? ALP is increased. Why is ALP increased? Very good, Satvik. Very good. Yes, you're right. ALP will increase. So can you tell me why is ALP increase in this patient? Total and direct bilirubin will be increased. Yes, Vanshika. So total and direct bilirubin will be increased and ALP will be increased. And what can you tell me why is ALP increased in this patient? Yes, Vishnu. There might be slight increase in AST and AST. Yes, agreed. So in okay, so in this patient, since we are expecting an obstructive pathology, the there is a, there is a problem in the biliary drainage. Okay, so there is a problem in the bile ducts, or either the common hepatic duct or common bile duct, and the alkaline phosphatase is present in the biliary tree. So we'll expect a elevated ALP and gamma glutamyl transferase both, which are expressed in the biliary tree. But since gamma glutamyl transferase is more specific to the biliary tree, because there are different uh, isoforms of ALP are present in our body, and it might also be raised in a patient who is having a bone pathology, because in patients bone also has a different isoform of alkaline phosphatase, and it might be raised in a bone pathology. So gamma glutamyl transferase is more specific for biliary tree pathology. Also, in ALT and AST, uh, ALT is more specific for liver injury, because AST is also present in other tissues like muscles, brain, and kidney. And so, if there is isolated rise in AST, then we should think of some other tissue injury. Okay, and they will be increased in when there is a damage to the hepatocyte. Okay, now, we'll also do urine examination in this patient, and we did an X-ray abdomen, and we found this finding. So here you can see in the right hypochondrium there is a radio opaque shadow. Okay, and this is probably due to the stone called stone disease. So in this patient, we'll do liver function test, and we find elevated alkaline phosphatase level. Okay, so let's come to a difference between obstructive and non-obstructive jaundice. So in obstructive jaundice, a history of abdominal pain and fever might be present, whereas in non-obstructive jaundice, it is mostly absent. And in obstructive jaundice, a history of pruritus, clay-colored stools, dark-colored urine will be present, whereas it will all be absent in non-obstructive jaundice. In obstructive jaundice, when you do urine examination, urine bilirubin levels will be present. Urine bilirubin will be present in obstructive jaundice, because there is conjugated bilirubinemia. Whereas in non-obstructive jaundice, mostly there is unconjugated bilirubin, which is increased, due to which you would not find bilirubin in urine. You might find bilirubin in urine in non-obstructive jaundice if there is a hepatic hepatic cause of jaundice. Okay, in obstructive jaundice, since there is no bilirubin which is released in the bile, so the urobilinogen level will be absent. Whereas in non-obstructive jaundice, mostly uh, it will be either normally present or increase in cases of hemolytic jaundice. Okay. Then the serum bilirubin, what will happen to serum bilirubin level? Serum bilirubin level will there will be increase in direct bilirubin in obstructive jaundice, whereas in non-obstructive jaundice, mostly indirect bilirubin is increased, and sometimes direct bilirubin may also be increased, but it will always be less than 12 milligram per deciliter. And what about the liver function test? Yes, yes. So liver function test, the AST in the liver function test, the AST, ALT will be normal in obstructive jaundice, but they might be elevated in non-obstructive jaundice, or might be normal also, like in hemolytic causes or in pre-hepatic causes, they will be normal. But in hepatic causes, they will be increased. but they will be normal in obstructive jaundice, because obstructive jaundice is mostly post-hepatic. It's always post-hepatic. But in ALP, the values of ALP and GGT will be elevated in obstructive jaundice. So it helps us in differentiating from non-obstructive jaundice, which the values of ALP and GGT will be normal in non-obstructive jaundice. Similarly, serum protein levels will be normal in obstructive jaundice, whereas it might be decreased in hepatocellular jaundice, in which there is injury to the liver, okay, due to which, since the serum proteins are produced in liver, so there will be decrease in the liver proteins. Okay, now let's go to the next case number 3. So we have a 65-year-old female, 65-year-old female who has increased swelling of lower legs and difficulty in breathing for past 5 years. On physical examination, she has an irregular pulse and there is a dullness to percussion at the lung bases. The liver span is increased and her neck veins are distended. On chest radiograph, a large bilateral pleural effusion is seen. She dies of cardiac dysrhythmia. The cut surface of liver at autopsy is shown in the figure. The liver is enlarged, tense, with blunted edge. Which of the following underlying condition was most likely present in this patient? Okay, can anyone tell the diagnosis in the patient in this case? Anyone? Very good, very good. So Sanjeev has answered option D. And who else? Okay, Komal has answered, Sanjeev has answered. Okay, a lot of you people have answered the right answer. Okay, let's see. Let's have a look at the case. So here we see a 65-year-old woman who has increased swelling of the lower legs and difficulty in breathing. So why is there is edema in the lower limbs? Okay, so this edema can be due to various causes. We can think either there can be a cardiac cause, okay, or there can be a hepatic cause, or there can be a renal cause, right? So whenever we get a patient with edema, we think of three causes. Either there is a cardiac cause, or there is a renal cause, or there is a hepatic cause. Okay. Then we see on physical examination, she has an irregular pulse and there is a dullness on percussion and a lung basis. So patient has irregular pulse and a dullness on percussion. What will this signify? This dullness on the percussion at lung basis will signify that there is probably some pleural effusion in this patient. Okay, so since this pleural effusion along with edema, so we will think of probably a cardiac cause, because both the systemic circulation and the pulmonary circulation is compromised. Okay, then we see on examination we also find there is the liver span is increased and the neck veins are distended. So this point, the neck veins are distended, lead us to think that there is a right-sided heart failure, as there is increase in the venous pressure, and the blood that is coming to the heart is not being able to, the heart is not being able to pump that whole blood. Okay, due to which there is distended veins. And since the liver span is increased, so as we have ma'am taught in the last lecture also, The liver span is increased in cases where there is okay. Can anyone answer how when can a liver span increase? What are the causes of increased liver hepatomegaly? Yeah, so liver span is increased because there is the venous drainage is not occurring properly. There's obstruction in the venous drainage. Okay. Now let's see. So this is an X-ray of the patient, which is showing bilateral pleural effusion. Here you can see that there is blunting of the costophrenetic angle, and this depicts the pleural effusion. And then they are telling us that she dies of cardiac dysarrhythmia, and this is the cut surface of the liver. Here you can see this area. This is the area of pathology. So can anyone give me the diagnosis? What does this? What does this? What pathology is this? Can anyone give me the name of this pathology here? The liver is tense, enlarged with blunted edges. Yes, very good. Very good. Yes, a lot of you are answering. Very good. So, this is the chronic inflammation of liver. On draws, you will see classic nutmeg appearance of the liver, okay, which is caused by chronic passive condition from right side heart failure most commonly, okay. Grossly, there is a variegated mottled appearance which reflects hemorrhage and necrosis in the central lobar region. There is sharp demarcation between the viable, pericodal, and necrotic or atrophic pericentral region that are suffused with blood. On microscopy, you will see this kind of picture. See, in this picture, you can see this is a portal tract. Okay, this is also portal tract, and this is a central vein. So around the central vein, there is congestion. Okay, this is known as central lobular sinusoids are congested. Okay, and the hepatocytes around these areas become atrophic. The size they decrease in size, and here near the portal tract, the hepatocytes have preserved morphology, and ischemic coagulative necrosis of hepatocytes is seen in the central region of the lobule. Okay, now here you can see this is a hepatic lobule. As we can see, this is between the central vein and portal triad is a hepatic essence. Here in micro photograph, you can see this is a hepatic artery, this is a portal vein, and this is the bile duct. And this part will form the hepatic sinus with this as central vein. In this part, there is necrosis. Near the central vein, there is ischemic necrosis of the hepatocyte occurring, which is the zone 3. And in zone 1, the hepatocytes are preserved. The diagnosis of this case was called for pulmonale, in which there is a right-sided heart failure. Okay, let's go to the last case, case number 4. A 65-year-old man with a history of alcohol abuse who has had hematemesis for past day. On physical examination, there is mild jaundice, spider angiomas, and gynecomastia. He has mild pedal edema, normal JVP, and massively distended abdomen. On paracentesis, the fluid obtained shows accumulation of protein poor fluid that is free of inflammatory cells. So, what could be the possible pathology? Can anyone answer the question? alcohol liver disease. Okay. Okay, many of you have answered the right answer. Okay, let's see the case. So 65-year-old man presents with a history of alcohol abuse. So since and hematemesis. What does hematemesis indicate in this patient? Patient has a history of alcohol abuse. What does hematemesis indicate? What do you interpret when we are telling you that there is hematemesis? Yes, anyone? Yes. So hematemesis indicate that there is formation of dilatation of esophageal veins. Okay, due to which are burst. Okay, and this hematemesis will indicate that there is portal hypertension. Due to portal hypertension, there is formation of these. Hello, am I audible? Yeah, okay, okay. So yeah, there is formation of these other channels through which the blood is drained. Okay, and there is formation of esophageal varices. There is formation of caput medusa, which is the dilatation of periumbilical veins. There is even patient might even have bleeding per rectum. Okay, so these all symptoms will be seen. These all things patient has a mild jaundice, and there are spider angiomas. Spider angiomas and gynecomastia occurs when there is chronic liver injury due to which there is increase in the estrogen levels, circulating estrogen levels in males, and it will lead to gynecomastia and spider angiomas because estrogen will cause validation of these capillaries in the patient. Then we will see that the patient has distended abdomen. Distended abdomen is mainly due to the ascitic fluid that is accumulated in the abdomen. And since this fluid is a transudate, that is why it is protein poor and there is no inflammatory cells. So, what other investigation would you like to do in this patient? Okay, we'll like to do a liver function test. We'll like to do viral serology, ultrasound abdomen, and we'll also like to do liver biopsy in this patient. So, what are the indications of liver biopsy? Can anyone tell the indications of liver biopsy? Can anyone tell the indications of liver biopsy? Okay, let's have a look at the indications. So, there can be diagnostic indications or therapeutic indications. In diagnostic indications, we include diagnostic indications include primary liver disease, suspected primary or metastatic carcinoma, focal lesions which are detected on imaging or laparotomy, evaluation of systemic disease like tuberculosis or myeliosis, pyrexia of unknown origin, unexplained hepatomegaly, staging of lymphoma, familial disease like glycogen storage disease, hemochromatosis, Wilson's disease. And there can be therapeutic or prognostic indications like in alcoholic liver disease. We have to look for the cirrhosis in liver. Okay, then chronic active hepatitis or hepatotoxicity of the drugs. There are two types of liver biopsy needles that we know of. There is aspiration type and cutting type. Most commonly used needles are manganese needles, which is an aspiration type needle, and the other type of needles used are Wim-Silverman needle and Hubert needle, which are cutting type needle. We'll read a little bit about Wim-Silverman needle because this is something which has been asked in your exam. Uh, so it has three parts. It has a bifid needle. This is a bifid needle, and this is a stylet or trocar, and there is a cannula. So during the procedure, first of all, we prepare the patient. It is usually an OPD procedure, and we ask the patient. Uh, we first ask for PT-INR of the patient. Patient should not have any bleeding disorders because liver being a very highly vascular organ, we have to be careful that the patient should not have any deranged PT-INR values. Okay, then we should be able to monitor the patient after the biopsy for a few hours, and then we can ask patient to go. We will give local anesthesia with 1% lignocaine, and we can, for small children, we'll have to do it under general anesthesia. So during the procedure, we take the stylet. The stylet is a solid. Uh, the stylet is a solid thing. Okay, so we insert it in the cannula and we give an incision on the skin and to the uh, reach up to the liver, and we ask the patient to hold breath. First, we ask the patient to hold breath and we percuss the liver span, and just below the upper limit of the liver, we mark the rib. Okay, we mark the space, intercostal space. In that space, we give a cut with a we give incision, and through that incision we insert the stylet with cannula, and we have to be very quick. Then as we reach the liver, we take out the stylet and insert this bifid needle into the liver and rotate it clockwise, one whole rotation, and quickly take it out, and then we cover the incision and close the incision. Okay, this bifid needle here will contain the tissue in this part, and that will send for biopsy. Okay, so here this is the needle which is there in our apartment. This is the bifid needle, and this is the cannula. We don't have the stylet part. Okay. So these are the contraindications of doing a liver biopsy. If the patient is uncooperative, we can't do, obviously, because the patient has to hold the breath while we are doing the procedure. Then, if there is severe anemia and hematocrit value is less than 30%, if there are cognitive abnormalities, okay, we need to get a PTINR of the patient before the procedure. If there is a local infection in the area, if the patient has massive ascites, then also we won't be able to percuss and see the liver span. Okay, and if there is a high grade extrahepatic obstructive jaundice, then also we can't do the liver biopsy. Now, in this patient, on microscopy, we found out this picture. So, can any one of you guess the pathology? All of you know there is alcohol liver disease. So, this is the fatty change we see in alcohol liver disease. So on what will you find on gross? On gross, the liver is enlarged and dense with blunted edges, and on cut section, it will be soft, yellow, and greasy. On microscopy, you will find hepatocellular steatosis, which begins in central lobular hepatocytes. The lipid droplets range from small to large, and the largest will expand the cell and displace the nucleus to the periphery. You may also find steatohepatitis, in which you might find ballooning of the hepatocytes, as ma'am already told you. This is the reversible injury. Okay, and there will be Mallory Denk bodies. Here you can see Mallory Denk bodies, and neutrophil infiltration may also be seen in steatohepatitis. It further progresses to steatofibrosis, and grossly the patient, the liver will be brown, shrunken, non-fatty, and cirrhotic nodules might be seen, and which are usually less than 0.3 centimeter in diameter. On microscopy, when there is fibrosis set in, you will see these regenerative nodules, which are basically the regenerating hepatocytes. They don't have any particular organization that we see in normal liver. Okay, and they will be surrounded by fibrotic bands. The normal lobular architecture will be gone. And this is a reticulin stain. Reticulin stain is a silver stain that you do, and you can see these bands around the regenerating nodules. Okay, thank you. That is, I think, last slide.